In this video, Matters of Scale, we're going to be talking about relative sizes of things. And in particular, we're going to be comparing relative sizes of things at the cell scale, like different types of cells and things in the cells, like ribosomes and proteins, to the relative sizes of things at our scale that we're kind of familiar with and understand. And the point of all of this is so that when we're talking about different things interacting at the cell scale, we can kind of visualize what they really would look like, kind of what their sizes are. And so in a sense, to say, if I'm comparing a cell and a protein, or thinking of what a protein is doing inside of a cell, if this is the cell, like, is this orange the protein? Or is this like tiny little grain of sand on my finger that you can't even see on this camera, the protein? So let's get started, shall we? So what you can see here are two tables. And on this side, we have a table of the sizes of things at our scale. For instance, the length of a football field, or the height of your average man. And notice that all of these sizes are given in meters, because that makes sense for the things that we're looking at that are on our scale. This other table has the sizes of things at the cell scale. So things as small as a water molecule, all the way up to the size of an entire typical eukaryotic cell. And these sizes are all given in micrometers, or microns. In other words, 10 to the negative 6 meters, or 0.0000001 meters. So pretty tiny thing. And what I've asked you to do in this exercise is to take a couple of things at the cell scale and find a couple of things at the human scale that are about the same relative size. And it doesn't need to be exact. Again, I just want you to get kind of a sense for how big a water molecule is compared to a cell. First, let's look at the typical size of a eukaryotic cell. So a typical eukaryotic cell diameter, and that's just the distance across the cell, compared to a typical prokaryotic cell diameter. And looking at my table, I can see that a typical eukaryotic cell is about 10 micrometers across. And a typical prokaryotic cell is about 1 micrometer across. Now this is a really easy one. We can see immediately that there's a 10 to 1 difference between these two. But something that I'm going to be using on the less straightforward examples is I'm going to be looking at the difference in the order of magnitude, or factors of 10. So for instance, I say this one is easy. It's 1. Whereas 10 is 1 decimal place away, or 1 power of 10 away, and it's 1 power of 10 larger than 1. So I can say that because they're 1 power of 10 difference, it's 10 to 1. So let's look at some things on our scale to get a sense for what a 10 to 1 difference in size feels like. And I'm going to go ahead and find something that's about 1/10 the size of a city bus. So I'm going to look at a city bus length. And I'm going to find something that is about 1 decimal point away. So I see that this is 1 decimal point away from being around 1. And I'm looking for something 10 times smaller than that, or 1. I might say either a basset hound or about the length of a man. I'll go ahead and say about the height of a man. Again, the city bus length is about 14 meters, and the height of a man is about 1.8 meters. In other words, again, this one is at 1 already, and this one is 1 factor of 10, or 1 decimal point larger. So just like in our cell scale example, these are 1 decimal point, or 1 factor of 10 different. Or about 10 to 1. And I chose specifically an example that doesn't line up perfectly to just remind you that we're not looking for things that are exactly the same difference. Because, for instance, here we're even only looking at typical cell diameters. So even if you just took at random a eukaryotic cell and a prokaryotic cell, they wouldn't be exactly 10 to 1 different. But it'd be about a 10 to 1 difference in how big they are across. Let's look at another example. Let's look at, say, a protein next to a water molecule. So do a typical protein catalase. Again, I'm looking at its diameter, so how big it is across. And I'm going to be comparing that to a water molecule. I see that catalase is about 0.1 micrometers, and a water molecule is really tiny. And again, I'm going to compare kind of the powers of 10, so how far they are from being 1 micrometer in powers of 10 or decimal places. So this one is 1, 2, and it's 2 smaller than 1, so I'm going to go ahead and call it -2 decimal places. And this one over here is 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places smaller than 1. So I can compare these and see that they're 2 different. Or in other words, about 100, 2 powers of 10 difference. So a catalase is about 100 times across what a water molecule is. So you could line up 100 water molecules across a catalase. So now let's find something at the human scale that has this same relationship. And I'm just going to start, let's say I want to compare something to an Idaho potato. Sure, why not? An Idaho potato is 0.18 meters across. So let's find something that's about 2 decimal points different than this. So this one is 1 away. So I want to find one that's 3 away, right? Or 2 decimal points difference. So this fits the trick. 1, 2, 3, yep. So I'm looking at about the same difference between an Idaho potato and the head of a pin that I am between a catalase and a water molecule. Again, just to confirm, I say, okay, this one is 1 difference away from 1. This one is 3 away from 1. And I see that just like in our cell scale example, this is 2 decimal places away. Or in other words, there's about a factor of 100 difference. Now work through the rest of the worksheet to get a sense for how big these things are at the cell scale compared to other things at the cell scale.